The paintwork of the body, traditionally for cars from Japan, is thin and delicate, which requires special attention and care. Many owners cover the paintwork with a protective film to eliminate the drawback. The most problematic are the edges of the rear arches, on which paint blister are often observed. Before sealing, the part is repainted along the stiffener. Also, the points of contact between bumpers and fenders are prone to paint damage. This generation, unlike its predecessors, is devoid of significant problems with the corrosion resistance of the body. However, due to age, certain troubles nevertheless take place. Most quickly, saffron milk mushrooms appear in open areas of metal. The edges of the roof, hood, arches and thresholds often suffer. Also, surface rust can be found on the seams, rolling in the lower parts of the doors and under the decorative body panels, at the attachment points. In the first copies, rust can be found on the elements of the rear of the bottom, welds, under the seals and in the internal cavities. In timely action is taken, this will not lead to serious consequences. On cars that constantly spend the night in the open, the ground wire can rot. As a result, there are difficulties with starting the engine. For the Mazda6 GH station wagon, special attention should be paid to the attachment points of the roof rails, as over time under them appears corrosion and their seals can let moisture into the cabin. For sedans and hatchbacks, the seals of the trunk lid and the rear optics are not reliable, through which water enters the trunk. Also, over time, moisture seals in the engine shield wiring and underbody plugs begin to let moisture into the cabin. They are susceptible to damage due to low ground clearance. Bumpers, door seals, radiator grille, fog lamp mounts and washer covers with the advent of cold weather become very hard and easily damaged even with a slight load. Other troubles include poor wear resistance of the windshield overriding to 100,000 km. The original glass is expensive, about $500 USD, so many prefer the analog and not always of high quality. If you are going to buy a car from your hands, be sure to check the markings. How to do this is described in this article. For cars with a rain sensor, glass replacement is complicated by the need to reglue the lens, since the sensor is unlikely to work correctly on Chinese glass. In the rear window, the mounting latch does not like severe frosts and begins to creak with the advent of cold weather, -15 and below. In the front optics, in addition to weak protective plastic, it rubs off and becomes cloudy, and the body, it is worth highlighting a short lens life. For cars with AFS headlights with auto correction, when parking for a long time, you need to keep the wheels straight, otherwise you can melt the ceiling, the replacement of which is not a cheap pleasure. Another disadvantage is the difficulty of replacing lamps or checking the condition of the ignition units. You have to remove the bumper. Blocks of piston lamps can also cause problems, the presence of condensate of which often leads to corrosion of the wiring. The door stops received a lot of criticism, which already after 50,000 kilometers began to work with the characteristic clicking sound. To solve the problem, a bulkhead is required, with the installation of new washers under the springs and the fitting of crackers or the purchase of a new part, from inexpensive ones suitable for Li-Fan B6109-100. The external trunk release button often fails, in which the protective rubber wears out and begins to leak moisture, as a result of which the contacts are oxidized. The Mazda6 GH powertrain line consists of 4 gasoline engines of the MZRL family: 1.8 120 horsepower, 2.0 147 horsepower, 2.5 170 horsepower, and 3.7 273 horsepower, and 2 diesel engines, 2.0 and 2.2 liters. Gasoline engines have almost standard reliability, plus they are equipped with a timing chain drive, which does not require attention for more than 200,000 kilometers. It is worth noting that the replacement of the timing should be carried out using templates and torque wrenches, since the crankshaft and camshaft stars have a vernier-less feed. Since these motors do not have hydraulic compensators, every 80–100,000 kilometers it is necessary to adjust the thermal clearances of the valves. At approximately the same interval, you have to clean the throttle valve and the ventilation system. If this is not done, unstable idling and increased fuel consumption are ensured. Motors 1.9 L813 and 2.0 LF17 are structurally identical and suffer from the same source. The main disadvantages of these engines is increased oil consumption. It should be noted that almost all engines eat little, just the volume that has to be topped up dependently heavily on driving style. Also, oil consumption can be affected by leaks in the valve cover gasket, through which lubricant enters the candle wells, which leads to failure of the candle tips and breakdowns in the ignition system. Another of the minuses is to highlight a large amount of plastic in the intake, which over the years begins to let air through. The cooling system also requires attention early enough. Most often the thermostat fails here, and once every 4–6 years you have to change its housing LF941597Z. There are also complaints about the reliability of the cooling radiator. It is prone to leaks and loss of honeycombs, and the tightness of the oil-water heat exchanger. Also, among the problematic ones, it is worth including a pump, a generator, and the right engine support. A 2.5 L5VE motor is considered the most reliable and does not particularly eat oil. The main malfunctions of this internal combustion engine are caused by heat exchanger leaks and failure of attachments. The most powerful 3.7-liter engine, CAY1, does not cause any particular problems. When buying a car with such an engine, you need to remember that the pump here is driven by the timing, and if it is not changed in time, the bearings can jam, which is fraught with the meeting of valves with pistons, and there are 24 of them. It would seem that the situation is standard, change the pump more often and no problems, but replacing it is not so easy and expensive. The pump is installed in the collapse of the block. Because of this, you will have to disassemble the timing and remove the entire intake. Mazda6 GH with diesel engines, although they have good performance and are quite economical during operation, they can cause a lot of trouble. The main ailment of the 2-liter engine RF7J is the tendency to clog the pistons and the particulate filter. Quite often, owners also face such troubles as burnout of the sealant washers under the nozzles and fuel leaks into the oil. The return nozzles flow. In older cars, due to the appearance of cracks, the intercooler flange begins to flow. On pre-styling versions, problems with oil pressure are not uncommon, which are fraught with increased wear of engine parts. The 2.2-liter unit R2AA is less problematic, but it does not have exemplary reliability either. The main expense item here is the timing chain, the resource of which rarely exists 150,000 kilometers. Things are no better with the reliability of the high-pressure pump, injectors, and turbine position sensor. Like the younger motor, the seals washers of the injectors are prone to burnout, which is fraught with gas breakthrough. During the burning of the sod, diesel fuel does not always have time to burn out and gas into the oil pan. It leads to an increase in the level of lubrication. The Mazda6 GH was equipped with 5- and 6-speed mechanics as well as a 5-band automatic transmission. Mechanical transmission, as a rule, do not bother with breakdowns. The main thing is to regularly monitor the level of lubrication and change it at least occasionally. But the original clutch is considered quite problematic and may need to be replaced after 60,000 kilometers. The discs wear out quickly. On long runs to 100,000 plus, the wings and synchronizers of the second and third gears require attention. With significant wear, it is manifested by difficulties with gear shifting and increased noise when switching. With rare use of the car, the drive cable turns sour over time. The automatic transmission is no less successful. The main reasons for early failure here are aggressive operation and the current heat exchanger through which antifreeze enters the oil and kills the box parts. The back cover of the automatic transmission is made of soft metal. Because of this, for those who like to arrange races at traffic lights, the shafts were warped at a short run and the bearings were broken. Also, they do not like abrupt starts of the brake band, uneven output appears, and the clashes of the override reverse drums. When worn, vibrations appear, after which the reverse gear stops turning on. The weak point of the box is the adaptive VFS solenoids. Due to the fact that they clock quickly, they have a modest resource. In addition, in the sleeper-on-the-floor mode, the differential quickly gives up, in which the axis of the satellite grabs and it can break through the box body. When operating the machine in dirty oil by 150,000 kilometers of run, a bulkhead of the valve body will be required. But with the calm driving style and proper maintenance, the automatic transmission resource will be about 250,000 kilometers. Both axles use an independent suspension with double wishbones in front and a multi-link rear. The suspension is a little stiff, but still provides excellent handling. If we talk about the reliability of the Mazda6 chassis GH, then there are not so many weak points here. Most often, wheel bearings fail. Depending on the operating conditions, their service life ranges from 40 to 120,000 kilometers. Also, with tough operation and the use of low-profile rubber, you will often have to change all kinds of bushings and suspension rubber bands. Shock absorbers lose their elasticity on a run of 70–100,000 kilometers, become softer, resulting in poor handling. Silent blocks of levers on our roads go 100,000 kilometers or more. For cars with gas discharge optics, the body position sensor often bothers. As a result of souring of the rod connection, the sensors, and the suspension arm, the mount breaks off. The steering system uses a rack and pinion mechanism with the EUR. This node is one of the most vulnerable points of the Mazda6 GH and can begin to bother with breakdowns after 50,000 kilometers of run. The bushings and seals are the fastest to break in the rail, the vertical shaft of the steering mechanism, JS1F3212Y, rarely needs to be replaced. If there is a problem, look for a service where the rails are restored, since buying a new node scares off even wealthy owners, about 1500 USD. On the internet, you can find offices that make bushings to order from better materials than the original, providing the rail with 150,000 kilometers of run or more without repair. But the steering consumables, steering tips and rods, do without replacement 150 to 100,000 kilometers. The main complaints about the brake system are caused by the tendency of the mechanisms to sour, especially on the rear axle. Also, the disadvantages of the brakes include their noisy operation, creaking, and fear of overheating. In the cabin of the Mazda 6 GH, despite belonging on the D class, a lot of hard plastic is used and there is practically no sound insulation. The disadvantages here can also be attributed to the poor wear resistance of the gearshift lever and insert of the steering wheel. You should also highlight the fragility of fastening decorative panels after removing and reinstalling which crickets appear in the cabin. The front seats are often bothered by extraneous sounds, in which the backrest adjustment mechanism becomes unusable. Also, during operation, power windows may creak, lubrication of the guides is required, and the trunk shelf relevant for sedans. In winter, condensation collects in the doors, which when frozen reduce the mobility of the door opening cable. When choosing a car, check the integrity of the ashtray cover mechanism, since on many cars it is broken, although a trifle but unpleasant. The electronics also cause few problems. Most often, electrical failures are caused by moisture entering the BSEM connectors. The fact that the block has an unfortunate location installed at the driver's feet and often ends up in a puddle of water. Often, owners blame for malfunctions in the operation of the audio system, central locking, seat heating and standard alarms. The control unit fails. For machines equipped with Bose acoustics, after 4-6 years of service, the amplifier capacitors swell and the controller chip becomes unusable. The disease is manifested by wheezing when the volume is increased. Among other troubles, it is worth highlighting the tendency of the seat connectors to corrode, causes errors in airbags and pretensioners, and the unreliability of the rear window heating button, sinks. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.